everything you need to know about products and services that can improve your life. This is Experts on Call on CL 650.
This is a house that Jack built, y'all. Remember this house.
Good choice, Dwayne. I like that.
This was the land that he worked by.
All right, you are listening to StrataLife on CL 650, talking about living in a strata, and so many people do. With the cost of real estate in Vancouver, strata living is the option for a majority of people, especially young people getting started, and all kinds of questions that need answered. We have our guests here today. We have from CanStar, Albert Atfield. He's project manager and restorations at CanStar. We have David Barrett, managing director of City Lock Systems, and Drew Grout from Key Pacific Property Management. I'm going to pick up where we left off just before the break, because you mentioned something, and it kind of, as somebody who isn't involved in this, you say estimates aren't free. And you would think that if someone's going to come in and replace your boiler, you're going to get 3 estimates, replace your roof, you're going to get 3 estimates, because those are free, but they're not. Why not?
Well, people need to be paid for their time. So whether or not the Strata Corporation ends up paying for the quote is a different thing, but it is costing the contractor something to come out.
And time is money.
And time is money. And they, on smaller jobs, they realize that, they throw enough stuff against the wall, some of it's going to stick. It's kind of a marketing thing. But, they kind of build that into their pricing to a degree. Certainly.
So the estimate might be free, but you're paying for it when you get the job done, to an extent.
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, if people are coming out and giving you quotes and they're not charging you for them, and you're never awarding anything for them, they're going to stop coming when you call. Mm-hmm. You got to be careful not to take advantage of that tender process. Larger projects, certainly big costs, big dollars involved with some of these multi-million-dollar projects. It costs a lot of money.
Now, is that a hard one to tell the Strata Council? That's the hard pill to swallow. Oh, by the way, engineering costs and these bids are all going to cost you X number of dollars. And they're like, what? We have to pay before we even get the work started?
Well, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that we called David to get a quote on an upgraded system that he's going to charge for that quote. Depending on the situation that we're talking about, that there may be a cost. There's always going to be a cost to the contractor, and sometimes they need to try and recover that. So I think some of those costs are built into the pricing, but not directly. Other companies will charge. They won't. We're not coming out unless you want to pay me X amount of dollars to come out.
And I guess that's an education you have as a property manager to the Strata Council that, hey, everybody needs to make a living here. You don't work for free, and you got to pay these people.
We try and build relationships with the contractors so that we're not having to contend or be faced with, $500 to have them come out and quote.
And that's where a property management company like Key Pacific helps, because you have the people right here to call.
The relationships too. Yeah.
Okay, our last question for you, Drew, is our Strata Council was preparing for our annual general meeting. We came across some records that showed a current owner still owed money from a series of fines from 5 years ago. Our bylaws don't allow owners that owe a balance to vote. So the owner was refused entry to the AGM. Now the owner is threatening to sue, of course. Did the council do the right thing?
Couple of considerations here. First of all, you have to have the bylaw that says if you owe money, and the Strata Corporation is in a position to file a lien, you could be refused the opportunity to vote. That doesn't prevent you from attending the meeting.
Yes. Yeah, surely you're allowed to go.
Yeah, you just may not be allowed to exercise a vote. But the other thing here, it talks about from 5 years ago. In recent years, there's been the Statute of Limitations Act, or the Limitations Act, that's come into play. And if you have a debt owing to the Strata Corporation that's over 2 years, you basically cannot recover that in the courts anymore. So you got to take action on your fines and other charges to the Strata Corporation within a 2-year period, or you lose the opportunity to recover that. So,
well, how do Stratas typically enforce those fines? What do they do to make sure they extract the money from the owner?
Well,
is that when they call Dave and change the key lock?
No. fining is a one way to enforce the bylaws, but it doesn't always result in a change of behavior. And you get fine after fine after fine accumulating, and you go to court, and you know battle ensues, and you may or may not get the money. The only way you can ultimately get somebody to pay a fine is to try to recover that money through small claims court.
Yeah. And then you've got a real battle in the building, right? That's when real hardships develop.
Yeah. You know, somebody, you know, we've typically said, you know, leave the fine sitting there. If they don't want to pay, they don't want to pay. If they're going to sell it, chances are they're going to pay it, unless it's really a big thing that might be challenged at the time of the sale. But we always have to keep an eye on the 2-year time clock. So let's say somebody is getting a fine every month for late strata fees or non-payment of something that they could receive a fine every month for. So if the fines start exceeding 2 years, and what you have is the fine that's over 2 years drops off and the new one comes on. Mm-hmm. But the most you're going to get is 2 years worth of fines. So we as strata managers, we need to pay attention to that to help the councils make the decision well within the time limit if they want to pursue that matter in court or not. Keep in mind that fines are cream. It's not lost money. It's not like Stratus paid something out. It's on top of everything else.
That's right. So we're going to switch over to CanStar Restorations. Albert Atfield is here as a project manager, and we're going to get into, you know, a pretty nasty situation. This one says, our strata unit suffered some damage during a small fire. And I think it's probably the worst thing that can happen to somebody's have a fire. What happens now? What updates should I expect? And who should they come from? So updates is the key word here, I think, because the restoration is to a certain level, right?
There'll be the updates traditionally with a fire would go through the property manager, so that's traditionally would be your first point of contact. After the fire is engaged, I myself as a contractor prefer to take that responsibility on directly with the client so that I can keep them updated a little bit more frequently, and they can ask the questions that maybe there might be uncomfortable questions for them to ask somebody else, so I can kind of coach them through the situation.
All right. Now, the next question says, we're staying with relatives after a flood caused major damage to our ground floor strata unit. How long does it typically take for the work to be done and for us to move home?
Well, that can depend on severity. A couple of ways. Cause, like type of water loss, if you will, can change that because there can be invasive actions that have to be taken, removal of walls, insulation, cabinetry, you name it. So depending on the situation, traditionally you're probably going to brace yourself for about 3 months.
Really?
In most cases.
Inconvenience.
Yeah. I mean, you might be able to get access and live in the unit earlier, but the completion of the project and going through the process of the insurance and all those types of things, I always tell people plan for 3 months. And then as we get midway into the project, we see that we're closer than maybe it's 2 months, or worst case scenario, now we're looking at 5. Mm-hmm. So we can have those discussions as the project goes. As all the pertinent people that are involved in it, the insurances and all the people that write approvals and all that get on board, there's certain steps that have to be taken. So that's why the timing can get stretched out longer. If it was damaged and you and I had a personal agreement, we could probably fix it in 2 weeks. But it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Right?
The other one is the insurance. And we talked about this when we've had our insurance expert on. And you have to make sure when you have insurance that you have money to live somewhere else. Yeah. Like you have to make sure that that is in your insurance policy. If I'm out of my house for 3 months and I've got to get a short-term rental, which are very expensive typically, that's got to be covered.
Yeah. And so you want to, in most cases, personally, I always feel that if somebody asks me how long should I plan to live out under an insurance policy, bank on 2 years. Because if you had a serious fire, that's how long it could take for that complex to get back in order. That's it. So that might be $40,000 of living out allowance. I wish I could tell you that it might be less than that. It may be, but it all depends on the severity.
It's interesting. Problem. My neighbor across the street, this is a house, had a sink upstairs overrunning while the wife was in the shower. She left it on. She forgot it. Came down. All the floors, cedar floors, not cedar, fir floors, right, were all wrecked and what have you. Now, something you would expect, they have to fix the ceiling and replace the floor. You would think that, as you mentioned, you and I could get it together in 2 weeks and get that done. Months they were living in this rental out of the house because the insurance company and the contractor, it's this dance they do, and it can take a long time.
And there's other dances that happen, too, that we have to bring up because it's not fair to always say it's got the insurance is slowing it down. It might be that you've bought a floor that I have to buy from Finland. Mm-hmm. So now I got to get it and deliver it all the way here. That could take 2 months.
Yeah,
right? So there's aspects.
All kinds of variables.
There's different things that come into play that people have to be prepared for. That's why plan for the worst case scenario.
Okay. Now, we haven't forgotten about you, David. David Barrett's here, Managing Director of City Lock Systems. Now, we're talking about the front entryway systems, the systems where people get in elevators and access to parkades. What are the the big things that usually go wrong with these systems, and when do you typically get called for the access to the building?
Well, things break, and we get called. Sometimes people damage them in the process of a break-in, so we may be called in that situation. Probably one of the areas that, if I can bring some value to this conversation today is to save some people some money.
We like that.
And one of the things that I've seen is that Stratas don't often audit their costs on their phone lines that they're renting for the building. So if you've got fire alarm monitoring, elevator monitoring, entry intercom, you've got a dialer, those lines are maybe $60 a month. And sometimes buildings, put 4 or 5 of them in when they, open the building up, and a strata may be paying for those lines and never really checked. Could they, get rid of a few of them? Is there more economical ways? So, if you multiply that out at $60 a year, that's $700 and change per year per line, and they may be paying for extras of those. So that's a good thing, that get in and audit all of your invoices that are coming from your phone lines, and have a look, see if they're all needed. Bring in a company to have a look and see if there's a way to reduce a few. The other, while I'm on the topic of audit, is also it's a good idea to have your intercom audited. If you've got a digital directory, have it audited to see who's in there. Have it printed out. Audit the PIN numbers if people are using the individual PIN numbers to get in, which we don't recommend. We think that people should use a fob, programmable fob, not a PIN, because it's so easy to pass off to other people. And so check that there's no PIN numbers in your intercom, and audit all of the users in there at least once a year. It's a big thing to do, but it's really important, because you could spend all that money on a system and have a hole in it and you're not even aware of it.
Just quickly, in the last 30 seconds, are some new systems moving to cellular? Are they going that way?
Well, the dialer systems, when you're using a phone line, they have the capability to program a cell phone. They don't care if it's a landline or a cell phone.
No, but from the box to the units, are they using that?
Wireless?
Yeah.
Cellular?
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with systems that are doing that. There's certainly, in a smaller residential environment, there's wireless. There's plenty of wireless door buttons, entry phones, and stuff like that go to a smartphone. There's plenty of that stuff on the market. But in the multi-dwelling unit, strata-type unit, we're still hardwired, and I think it's the most reliable and the most economical at this point.
That's David Barrett, Managing Director of City Lock Systems, Albert Atfield from CanStar Restorations, and Drew Grout from Key Pacific Property Management have been my guest, gentlemen. Always fascinating. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to StrataLife on CL650. I'm Zach Spencer, and we'll speak to you next time.